Here we go. Oh, we're live. We are live. That's it. Hopefully we've got some people there to see us. Welcome. Here we are. We're live. Settle down. It's okay. We've got a room full of people, plus hopefully some of you people out there on YouTube. Welcome to Ask the Author. This is an author interview session with Louisa Guise, and here she is displaying her book. It's also National Writing Day, everyone. Happy National Writing Day. Did you not know that?
No,
yeah, there we go. So just to let you all know what we're doing, I'm going to be addressing you, not you, partly, but also we've got people in the room here. So let me let you know where we are. We're in Fourbears Books in Caversham. Fourbears Books is a local independent bookstore run by the wonderful Alex Forbes. And Alex is good enough to let my group, I'm Adrian Raphael, and I run Caversham Writers. Caversham Writers, we meet about once a month in this bookstore. And we also have online Zoom sessions. So we'll come to that, because the difference between meeting in person, as we are today in the bookshop, and the difference between that and having online Zoom sessions actually does come up in the book a little bit. Yeah. And we will talk about that as we go on and talk to Louisa. So this is the format. Let's let you know what we're going to do. I'm going to be interviewing Louisa now. If you've got questions that you want to ask Louisa about the book or about the chat that we have, pop them into the comments and we'll get to them at the end of the session. I've got people in the room here from Caversham Writers as well. They may well ask questions at the end as well. So with all that said, are we ready? Yeah. Shall we get started?
I'm talking to you, really.
You are talking to me. Yeah, we're going to ignore you guys now, really. We're going to be talking to the room and to each other.
Yeah.
But we'll start with you before we get onto the book. Let's start with you, because you joined Caversham Writers. You're a member of Caversham Writers.
Yes.
And this is kind of a first for us, because we've had authors come and talk to the group before.
We had Nicolette.
I know we've had Nicolette, who's a member as well. But when I say it's the first is that it's the first time one of our members is about to have a book published.
True. Okay.
And to come and talk to us. So you joined the group in 2019. So the question that I always put to our new members, and some of the people here will know what they had to answer to it, was, what were you looking for when you found Caversham Writers? So where were you as a writer? So can you cast your mind back to 2019 and think, what was I looking for when I needed this writer's group?
I wanted, I guess, support, a bit of a kick up the arse to get writing, and also just to connect with other people who are writing, see what they're doing, learn from anyone who might have been published already, learn more about that. So I wanted to kind of know more about the industry, about other writers, and also have someone holding me accountable, because it can be, when you're working full time and you've got a busy life, it can be really hard to actually focus and actually find time to write and actually write. So that's what I wanted out of it, and that's what I got.
Oh, good. That was going to be a follow-up question.
Okay.
Did you find it?
Yeah.
What were your writing priorities at the time in terms of what were you focusing on? Because I know that you do write poetry, but I think was that what you were principally writing back then?
No, I was actually writing a novel that I then parked when I had the idea for this book.
Right.
So the novel was about a phone that can call the dead. And it's a long time ago now. I'm probably somewhere between a quarter or a third of the way through. I'm sure I'm going to look at it after this and see lots of things I didn't see before and maybe change it. So I parked it for this book, because this book was one that I thought could be a little bit quicker. Novels can take over your life, as some of you in the room know. Maybe some of you online know. And this was also kind of a double killing two birds with one stone, because this book is much more in line with what I do as a day job, so it would be quicker, and also I think it would be put me in good stead for good job positions as well. So,
sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's kind of a dull question to ask authors, and most authors don't like being asked it. But I think in this case it might not be so, because we don't like asking authors, where do you get your ideas from? Because it's sort of the dullest question in the world. But how to leave a group chat does suggest that it's something that is born out of lived experience or something that you've encountered before that sparked the idea. So where did the idea come from?
It came on this idea on the sofa in the pandemic when there was someone going on and on about their new car in a group chat, and it was too much and it was annoying, but I wasn't leaving the group chat regardless of how annoying the conversation was, and neither was anyone else. So I'd started to sort of question, well, why aren't I leaving? What, and I started to think of all the reasons, for and against leaving, and I started making because this book sort of started as one big list of ideas that then was kind of filed into different kind of chapters and sort of planned out within a bit more writing and a bit more planning and a bit more writing and a bit more planning and research. So yeah, it came from definitely from lived experience, but I'd say I've always been quite suspicious of kind of social media. I was probably the last of my friends to get a smartphone. Okay. Anyone who knows me well will remember that I've still got that old Nokia that people were at the end were just like, oh, for God's sake, just get rid of it. And yeah, so I ended up getting a smartphone because, well, everyone's on the apps. You get left behind if you don't.
Yeah, I know. I think I was quite late to the smartphone as well. I was holding, and oddly, I was actually running the communications department of an IT a group. So it was a bit embarrassing, but I didn't want to be. Probably some of the things that comes up in the book occasionally. I didn't want to be beholden to work outside of work.
Yeah,
it felt like that was a step in that direction. Yeah, so I held on for a long time. But one of our members, Curtis Chin.
Yes.
He joined it. So Curtis is from America, and he's got a book out at the moment in America, a memoir. But he came. I remember a while ago, he came onto one of our Zoom calls, and he gave us a tip about a question that gets asked of writers by agents and publishers, particularly non-fiction authors. This is something that doesn't get asked of fiction authors, of novelists. It's really specifically directed at non-fiction authors, and it's, who are you to write this book? So they want to know what your authority is, I guess, behind writing it. Why are you the person to write this as opposed to another person? So how do you answer that? So I think it relates really to your work. You've already hinted at it.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I had the idea, and nobody else did. And going through the process of actually applying to be published, I did have to research other similar books, and there was nothing quite the same. Like, there are books about breaking up your phone as a whole, but there's nothing so specific about looking at group chats and behaviour. And also, I've got a communications background, so I work a lot with social media. I probably see a lot from the inside, and also I'm a child of the 80s and 86. So I really came of age, and some of you here in the room probably the same, came of age as the social media came of age. So I was 12 when we had MSN Messenger on the computers in school, and it was very new, and just I've always kind of been observing a lot of the behaviour, especially because I was sort of a bit behind in kind of adopting some of these technologies, just watching how other people are, and kind of sort of I'm someone who questions quite a lot. So.
And your career is in marketing and communications.
Yeah, my career is in marketing and communications. That involves heavily social media, and also thinking of trying to work, and my whole career is about working out how people communicate together and trying to really capitalize on that and utilize that to whether that to kind of get results for a company, whether that's more sales, whether that's engaging colleagues more, which is my current role. I've got to engage colleagues in quite different areas, so we're trying all kinds of things. And I don't know if anyone's on from Schenker, but we've got some exciting stuff coming up that I'm not going to say any more about.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if that answers that.
Yeah, I think it does. Let's talk about the book itself then. Let's move on to that.
Okay.
And you start the whole book with a potted history, really, of instant messages. You go right back to the sort of early days, I suppose, of network computing and messaging going across. I mean, in those early days, it seems to me that there's really barely a distinction between instant messages and email. Really, an email is what becomes the prevalent means of communication initially, and then instant messaging and chat functions get added on and differentiated
Yeah,
later. What's the driver going on there?
They sort of come side by side. I think there was, from what I've researched, there always seemed to be this desire that the goal seemed to be to get more people talking at the same time, and that was particularly within a business context, because businesses wanted, they didn't just, because initially it was just between you and the computer. You type something, the computer did something. You type something else, the computer did something else. Whereas I think from a business perspective, especially any businesses that might be global, or even not global, but might have lots of offices in the same country but dotted around, it's really convenient to get people communicating over distances at the same time. So there was always this kind of drive to try and find a way to get people in different remote locations talking to each other. And it's sort of weird because it's kind of flipped in a way that by talking to each other, we're sort of talking to each other less at the same time.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the goal, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I remember my experience when, as I said, I used to be an IT consultant myself, and trying to work out what came first or what drove instant messengers. Was it social media driving it in personal use first, or businesses driving it for business reasons?
It was business, as far as I can tell from what I've read. It was very much it was to help businesses be more efficient. But you know, as many things, like GPS was originally for business. Was it the US Army? And now everyone's using GPS just to get down the street. You know, so when it's a good idea, people will use it.
I mean, that's kind of bears up with my own experience, I think, because from my memory, it got to a point long before social media and smartphones, a few years before at least, social media and smartphones, email would dominate. Email was becoming unmanageable for businesses. It was becoming really expensive with storage. Every user of email in a business, in a corporate business, had their own inbox, and that inbox was managed. And so if you had a thread of emails between 4 or 5 people, then the storage initially, it wasn't as intelligent as it is now in terms of management of storage. Everybody's inbox was replicated across, so you had dozens of servers all managing storage, and it was expensive.
You still do though, don't you?
But you still do have separate inboxes, but that's what I mean by sort of the business driving the use of instant messengers. I think the chat function, the use of instant messengers. I think the chat function, I remember our department pushing quite heavily as a way of getting people to have smaller chats that weren't as the people, instead of replying to an email, and just then using up all the storage there. You know, you just have instead of having sort of a dozen servers supporting an email function, you've only got one chat server, and all of those conversations end up on that one server, and it was cheaper. Of course, I guess then what happens? The next thing that happens with social media and smartphones, they were things that kick that out into the personal use. Is that what really drove it, do you think? Is that when the use started around 2000, the mid 2000s and on?
Yeah, I think the combination of smartphones and also social media together is a huge driver, because MySpace got popular and then people sort of dispersed and then it wasn't as cool anymore. No one really used it, and moved on to MySpace. People are always kind of moving to the next thing. And now the young people are on TikTok, and maybe the younger people are on something else that we've never heard of yet. So I think people are always just interested in the newest kind of technology and the latest thing. But definitely, I think the fact that smartphones have made it so convenient to have the social media, and the social media is a platform that allows you to really express yourself. And I think people are always looking for ways to matter and to express themselves, and maybe to sort of show off a bit as well. I think that's a perfect kind of combination.
There's also a difference in use, isn't there, in terms of expectation from people that have grown up without these technologies to people that have grown up with them. There's a different expectation of how to use them and whether even to use them.
It's interesting because I think even people who grew up without still buy into a lot of the ideas that social media and smartphones give. So even some older people I know will be asking like, oh, why didn't you reply to my message straight away? Whereas in the beginning, maybe younger people, you would think, because they're the ones, like I can remember my friend's daughter even trying to tap things like my Nokia, which obviously don't tap, because at a young age she saw mummy tapping away. So you'd think the younger people would have that, but I think a lot of the ideas and the behaviours that have come with it, a lot of older people as well, and people like myself who are sort of in between, have also bought into those ideas and kind of see it as normal now. There's a lot of things that are normal now that didn't used to be.
And I guess another thing that maybe older people that didn't grow up with these technologies bring to the use of them is an expectation of how communication works or used to work outside of that arena of the virtual world, which is something we can come on to now, because the focus of the book is group chats on instant messengers. That's the main topic, really.
Yeah.
And to set the scene for all of that, you categorize the way we people, humans, communicate with each other and have done from year dot.
Yeah.
But you put the types of communication that we engage in into three separate categories, which you've coined the term dimensions to describe them. 3 dimensions. So tell us about the 3 dimensions of human communication.
Yeah. It was interesting to write, and I mean, I could probably, even especially with new ways of communicating evolving, I could probably drill it down even more and even split them out. But for the purposes of what I've written, it's in 3 dimensions. So the first dimension, as I've termed it, is normal human communication. So that's as we're all in this room, talking to each other. You can hear how my voice is. You can see my face. You can see how my body's moving, and you can see me and Adrian.
See whether I'm listening or not, or reading my notes.
That as well. So that's us. I think in our most normal state of communication. And I think once we start, because we're humans and because we are creative and we have different technologies and we're able to change the way we communicate with each other and enhance it in a way, we sort of pull away from this first dimension. So in the second dimension, it's kind of an in-between communication. So that could be like, for example, if you're on the telephone, and I mean the normal way of telephoning people, not the smartphone way. So if you're just on a normal telephone, you can still hear someone's voice, but you can't see them in person. You probably couldn't even run into the next room to see how they're doing, because they're probably in another country or in another part of the same city. So the second dimension is a little bit further removed. There's maybe a few more elements. It's sort of us leaving our mark in a way, and communicating over more of a distance.
It's distance and the ability to record and store.
Yeah.
So even maybe your book could be considered a form of second dimension communication.
I could probably get more complex and split it out even more. But for the purposes, it's like when you're sort of there but not there, you could say. And then the third dimension is you're communicating with somebody through a screen. You're not really there. There's no body language. There's no voice. You might not even be communicating like your own words. You might have a GIF that says "okay," or you might share a quote with somebody. So you're sort of that far removed again that you might not even be using your own words or phrases. You might have found a phrase that fits what you want to say, and you're giving someone else's phrase to somebody, and nobody can see each other. That's it, kind of in a.
And that's the key difference, I think, isn't it? It's the sort of the entirety of the communication being in the virtual world. So
yes, exactly.
So a Zoom meeting, conference meeting, or team meeting where we're on either an audio or video call or both. That sits really in what your terms second dimension.
Zoom
because we still can see each other and connect through that. We're not distanced as distanced as we would be in a group chat in instant messaging.
In the book I stopped short of making it 4 dimensions because Zoom came in during the pandemic. I was doing video calls by that point, but you could even say that that's a step. I don't know, that's sort of slightly different again, because you're still in a virtual world, but you are really seeing each other. At the same time, you could be a kitten or a potato or something like that as well. So there could be some. I've tried to keep it simple with 3, but there are definitely ways it could be pulled out for sure.
But we can talk about it with the group in terms of distinguishing between the first and second dimension, or even into third dimension with our own meetings. So and we're doing it. I hinted at it in the introduction. Really, we're crossing the boundaries even with this particular session, aren't we?
Yeah.
Because we've got people in the room here in Fourbears, and we're talking in first dimension, you and I. People can see us and how we're interacting, and they can talk to us. We've also got you guys on YouTube. Hopefully, you've got, you guys
somebody
on
there.
There's somebody there, I'm sure. But that is a distance, a remove that we don't have here, and we have to accommodate when we have communications in that manner, don't we? And I know from my own experience of hosting the Caversham Writers meetings, that's something that I've had to sort of think about. That when we have a meeting around a table in the room here, we can talk to each other and interrupt and have a conversation because we work it out because we can see each other.
Yeah.
Whereas I have to host it rather differently on Zoom. It's more formal. It feels to me it's much more formal. I have to be a proper host and say, now you talk and now you talk, and it's a very different beast, and it's something I've had to learn how to do.
When people, a lot of the time, people have conversations on Zoom or Teams, and they say bye, and they go bye and wave. And
I do that all the time. Yeah.
But if you were just having a normal conversation together, you wouldn't be like bye.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. and it's that kind of, and that's what I think maybe as well is one of those things that we bring to those type of conversations and that type of communication from something that we're used to experiencing in the real world.
Yeah.
Is that we feel awkward. We had to learn, even with the telephone, we had to learn how to end a telephone call or start one. The word hello. I think the word hello was actually invented, or not invented. That hello was a woo greeting or an exclamation, but it was translated into hello as a greeting for use on the telephone. People didn't know how to answer the telephone and what to say when you started a conversation, and then you had to learn how to close a conversation.
Yeah.
Which is what we'll come to, and I think is maybe the crux of the title of your book.
But also, and I mentioned this in the book too. Like, even though we're crossing dimensions now, figuratively, we're still talking to each other. We're still choosing to prioritize the first, because there's no way we could be sort of talking and talking and talking. And you can't really. You have to end up choosing, which can sometimes cause issues if people want to be sucked into their phone at the same time that they should be engaging with someone they're actually with, because they're sliding away from that first dimension into the third, and that can cause kind of conflict as well.
And the limitations imposed upon us by the technology have an effect as well. So if we're having an in-person meeting and there's like a dozen people around the table and two or more people start speaking at the same time, that kind of resolves itself naturally, doesn't it? Some people realise that three people are talking, so they back off, and then someone says, "Oh, sorry, no, you go," and it gets resolved naturally. If you're on a Zoom meeting and three people start talking at once, you usually don't even realise that three people are talking at once because only one voice will actually get broadcast to everybody else by the technology.
And so it can be harder to jump in.
Yeah,
as well.
Exactly. So you don't have that natural way of organising yourself into you go first, no, you go first. So therefore, you end up with the type of host-led conversation that's a little less organic and a little more stilted and not as conversational.
Teams has done well. They've added hands that have numbers. So if six people put up their hands, you've got one. You know who did it first. Because you used to be the hand up, and you'd be like, "Did you do it first? Did you do it first?" But now that's quite nice.
And you hinted at it just, or you mentioned it just then. People ending a call and doing that at the end. We don't really know how to end these type of chats, don't we? And it gets even worse. It's even when we're on YouTube or a live stream, or if we're on a Zoom call or something, we can announce to each other, and we will see each other on the screen that we're going to finish this conversation, and that's the end of it, because the meeting was set up for an hour or 2 hours. And even if we rather awkwardly wave, we know that it's coming to a close. But I guess the crux of your book and what you end up talking about is that isn't present when we eventually arrive into the fully third dimensional instant messenger chats. No one knows when the end of it is.
Sometimes there is no end.
Yeah, quite. I had a long time ago a work, a little story to tell you about what maybe highlights what we're talking about here. There was an incident at work in our IT department years ago, long before smartphones and instant messengers and all of that. And there was 3 or 4 of us chatting away about what had just happened in the office. And the person that was leading that discussion about this was the incident, this is what happened, this is what I think we should do. He was in full flow, telling everybody else what was going on. And then one other guy said, "Can I just stop you, man?" And he stopped. And then he just turned around and walked out. And it was like hilarious. And it was one of those things that everybody just remarks upon forever and then copied just for a laugh. But I think one of the problems with leaving a group chat maybe is that people don't want to be seen like that guy was. That guy obviously had social communication issues anyway. Didn't recognise some of the sort of signs that we give each other. But that's what's missing, I think. People are afraid to look like that when they're leaving a group chat. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think sometimes, yeah. And there's this sort of, you don't know what other people, you haven't seen their body reactions, you haven't seen their tone of voice, like, because normally if you have a conversation, you both know, okay, the conversation's over, or one person leaves, and you don't start panicking, like, why did they leave? You know, you think, oh, okay, it finished at that point for them for whatever reason, and it's fine. But people take great offense to, like, if you don't want to be in their group chat anymore, if you leave. And at the same time, on the flip side, you've got people worrying about if someone does leave, oh, why did they leave? Why would they do that? So it's sort of like, oh, they'll be mad if I leave, but then it sort of becomes a circle. I don't know if I'm explaining it very well, but
yeah, I think you are, because I think that because this I think does come down to the the nuts and bolts of where your book ends up and where where even the title of the book comes from, which is why would people have a problem leaving a group chat? We don't have a problem leaving any other kind of meeting or chat.
Yeah.
It's the nature of the endless nature of it.
Yeah.
There aren't the signals to know when it's come to a natural conclusion. So yeah, I think you bring that across well. You mentioned it earlier again as well, that there is a sort of growing movement towards a sort of decluttering in general, and that's been extended into sort of the online world, sort of digital minimalism.
We've now got dumb phones. What used to be, considered advanced is now stripping back the smartphone and calling for dumb phones. There's people buying dumb phones because they're worried about their technological usage of phones. That they're, because most of us are addicted to our phones. Let's face it, most of us are, and they're designed for us to be addicted to them at the same time. And people, I think, are sort of waking up to that. And there's a lot of concerns about children having social media, children having smartphones.
And I think, there's even a book called How to Break Up with Your Phone, isn't there?
Yeah.
There is a movement towards getting people to actually drop the technology. That's not really the space that you're going into here so much, is it? Because you do make the point of sort of talking about some of the positives of group chats and how they can be of benefit. So
and they can. Otherwise, they wouldn't be what they are today if they didn't have benefits. If they had no benefits, no one would use them. So it is convenient to message 10 of your friends at once and let them know. But it's it goes beyond convenience if that goes on for like 10 years and you're not really talking to each other, and there's one person just kind of hogging the group and the conversation, then it's lost that original purpose of conversation.
And there were some very real. I mean, you mentioned a very positive real world sort of case scenario of support groups for new mums, for instance, that goes beyond what's even possible with the type of support you might get from the NHS or even private practice. That they're providing a level of support, and that's only possible through the use of group chats to provide that instant, we're all in the same boat support network. But there are negatives too, I guess. So we'll come on to that maybe in a bit. But one concept that you bring up, I was really fascinated to think. I hadn't really thought about it before, but it's the concept of relationship decay in our social interactions in general, and this notion that social media in general only really exists because of relationship decay. Tell us something about that. What is relationship decay?
Relationship decay is when you might have had a strong bond with somebody and that just sort of gets weaker over time. And I don't know. I mean, I think I was quoting someone else in the book saying that there was somebody, I don't remember who said that social media exists to try and say, I think it was to try and stop relationship decay. I don't think it necessarily exists for that, because the history is much broader than that.
Sure.
But I think if you get into a kind of a habit where you're only messaging somebody through social media and you don't go out of your way to meet them for coffee, to actually meet up with them, or to invite them to anything, your relationship's definitely going to stagnate and not be what it was. On the flip side, you might have, like, I've certainly got friends who live in a lot of countries, and social media is the main way, and not necessarily in group chats. A lot of it's one-on-one, and that's actually kept me in touch with them. But then on the, and I might not visit them very often, but I would, reach out to them if I went to America or Bulgaria or Germany and say, hey, I'm coming, and it would be like we never were apart as well. So I think it can work both ways.
Yeah. It's interesting to me, though, the idea that social media and instant messengers could actually prolong relationships beyond what otherwise their natural life might have been.
That as well.
That it would ordinarily have been the case that, that maybe some of your school friends or uni friends or friends from one of your first jobs, as you go through life, you move on and form other relationships and friends and friend groups, and families comes into it as well. But those type of relationships often have a natural life, or did, that maybe have been extended beyond that natural life through the use of, and that could be, I guess, be a good thing, because it's down to our laziness sometimes when it's in the first dimension, as you call it, in the real world. So do instant messengers have a role to play in maintaining those relationships beyond their natural life, do you think?
It's definitely possible. You also might end up just in contact with somebody, if you're in a group chat. You might be friends with 5 of the 6 people in the group chat, but you might end up not being as close to the 6th person. Maybe the 5 dominate the chat, the 6th one doesn't really participate very much, so you're not really, and if you sort of dilute your relationship in a way if you're only communicating through all 6. Whereas if you actually took them aside and did it one-on-one, it might be stronger, because you two are actually working on your own bond, not kind of in relation to anybody else.
Yeah, and then when it comes to these group chats, you again, there are many ways to classify and group the different type of group chat or groups that form on things like WhatsApp and the other messenger platforms. But you kind of talk about the 3 main ones in the book. Sort of friend groups, family groups, work groups. Is that?
They're not main. They're just because there's lots.
Well, 3 main examples.
Yeah, they were my main examples, but they're not like the main types of chat, because there's hundreds of them. And I think I gave an example of a lady who was in about 10 group chats. They were like subgroups of a family chat, and they certainly didn't do her any favors. And that wasn't, and that was just family on her husband's side to keep everyone happy. So she had to be in a group for like the younger members of the family, a group for all the family, a group for the ladies, a group for, there was lots of different it's hard to keep on top of that, and to be in contact with people that much, I don't think is natural. I think you do need your space sometimes to just have for yourself and not feel that you have to be in contact with certain people that constantly without a break. I think it's natural to have just breaks for yourself.
It's also interesting to differentiate between the type of groups that form because you're getting a particular group of people together because of a relationship they might already have, like that they're already family members, so we have a family group. They're already a school friends, so we have a school friend group. But there are other times it's event based, isn't it? That you're brought together because you're all in the same team at work, or because you're all. I think an example you might use is a stag do's or hen do's. That are one-off events that end up being perpetuated endlessly because beyond the event itself.
Interesting. The stag do's and hen do's apparently have a shelf life of about 6 months, because unless you become good friends with some of them, you really don't have a reason to stay in that chat. Your purpose is over. You're not arranging anything for anyone. You don't have to receive instructions. So those chats don't last. But things like work group chats, in my research, they seem to be some of the most detested ones because they're on people's private. You're pulling a face there. They're on people's private phones, and they can blur the boundary a lot between colleague and friend, and you could get messages at midnight just because someone's out and having a great time and has to tell the whole work group chat about what they do. My work group chats haven't been that bad, and my current work group chat's actually on my work phone, so it's separate from my normal phone. But they were certainly some of the ones that came up as the most unwanted, but also the ones that people felt the most anxious about leaving, because that's their boss, that's their colleagues. They don't know how to approach that.
Yeah, something that really surprised me reading, talking of work group chats, is that the WhatsApp terms and conditions actually prohibit the use of business use for. Is that right?
That surprised me
too.
Yeah,
I was very shocked at that.
Yeah.
Do you know anyone that doesn't use it for work?
It's true.
Yeah.
That really shocked me as well.
I mean, I don't know how enforceable for a free app. I mean,
it's not.
What happens if WhatsApp discover that people are? I mean, they found out that the government were using it for, and then losing conveniently their chat history.
And the Met Police.
Yeah,
well.
quite.
Honest,
so I mean, what's the point of that? I suppose, but I don't know. It's interesting to me that they actually would put that in the term.
It does it. I think basically they're trying to cover themselves and say like we're not liable if something happens.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if you think about it, if you use Teams or Zoom for work, like your work's IT will have checked out the software, will have access to it, can shut down the account suddenly, can look at the records. If you've got WhatsApp on your private phones and or even sometimes on your work phones, if they're not that regulated and you're using that for work purposes, your work doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So if there's an issue like the Met Police sharing things they shouldn't, or the government having a spat in the background and the rest of the civil service doesn't know, it then becomes a bit of a sort of grey area, because work wasn't able to know about it beforehand, work wasn't able to shut it down or investigate. And it can also be a problem trying to then track down what was actually said, especially if people deleted messages. Because I think even if you delete something on Teams or Zoom, if it's on a work account, I think your work generally, your IT can still track.
Oh yes, that
would
absolutely be a prerequisite of the installation. Yeah,
so it can cause a bit of a headache for businesses. If people just use it to sort of say, hey, we're going to the conference and find each other, nothing's probably going to happen. But if they use it, if people get carried away,
the boundaries get blurred, don't they? People are using it, they're using it, and they find ways to use it even more.
Yeah.
I mean, that really did surprise. Was that the biggest surprise for you?
That was a huge surprise. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I read it on what, because I'd been using it in work before when I was still quite junior, and been told by the work to use it, and didn't really question it or think anything of it. So that was.
I think there is. I don't know how new it is. I think there is a WhatsApp for business now. So maybe that's something that again, the T's and C's for the personal product are just helping to differentiate that, so that they can then sell and license the business app to corporations.
But I guess a lot of businesses might still use the free version because they might not be so aware, and then they think, well, why would we pay money if we can just all have it for free anyway and save some money, which is understandable.
Yeah, I think Microsoft went through that with the use of Hotmail years ago.
Okay.
And or even instances of Office 365 that you can use for personal use and people using it for business use, and they had to get hot on that for licensing reasons.
Yeah, makes sense.
But so the final chapters in kind of move from the more general history and categorization of communications into specifically group chats and the etiquette around them as well.
Yeah.
So I've been sort of umming and ahhing about whether or not to have a WhatsApp group for us, for Caversham Writers. So what would your advice be if we were to set something up like that up? What would be the best practice? What should be the considerations in terms of using WhatsApp for the use case of us?
It's interesting because a lot of not group chat groups, but groups that you see on different social platforms, they will have their rules that they decide. You can't promote yourself, you can't harass anyone, you can't use vulgar language, etc. They'll have clear rules, and they'll say this is a group to talk about X. This is all we're going to talk about. So you can't go off track. And maybe social media, in terms of things like WhatsApp, should also kind of go in that direction, so that there is an option. I think I said this in the book, an option to make it clear what this chat is about, so that people aren't suddenly just putting their baby photos in because they feel like it, or other things. And obviously that can be of free will, because you're not going to tell a group of friends what they could talk about. But if you're in a specific group for a reason, it's good to have a reminder if this is what we will talk about. So maybe just making it really clear, making up some group rules that are decided by the group, and this is the topic that we're going to discuss only. Although I'm in a group for yoga, and it's nice, like it's not a bad group, but because there's a lot of yoga classes and a lot of people, the messages just mount up. Like I'm not reading them all, because they're not. I only want to know if I've got yoga on a Monday. I don't really want to know about every single class. And then occasionally it goes off topic, and somebody will post something, and then a lot of people will respond, and I'm finding I'm having to delete messages quite a lot just to find out if it's a bit of a price to pay, just to find out if I've got yoga on a Monday, which most Mondays I do.
Well, that's that. I mean, I think that you hit upon the key issue there, which is that most other sort of hosting platforms of Meetup, Caversham Writers is hosted on an application or website called Meetup.
Yeah.
And it's easy to set up the ground rules for how we interact. And what the group is all about. That WhatsApp doesn't lend itself towards that much, as you say. It's sort of difficult to establish.
You can put a title, but even a title doesn't do anything, because people are people, and they're still kind of in the mode of just communicating with other people, so they'll communicate about everything. Really.
Yeah, and then it becomes overwhelming. But setting up those ground rules would be the most effective way of managing it. So that's what we'll do if we do get round to a Caversham Writers WhatsApp group.
But do we need it?
Do we need it? Exactly. That is the other thing. I mean, that is a perfect question.
The conversation should always have a shared purpose. And once there's no shared purpose, because if we can use Meetup, or we're using LinkedIn as well. As long as we know what we're doing, and
I think it goes back again to sort of your first dimension, in-person meetings. If you have a work meeting, it's a regular weekly meeting on a Monday morning, or a project meeting that takes place on a regular basis. I always used to insist that the last item on the agenda was, do we still need this meeting? Because otherwise it just goes on and on, doesn't it? You're there next week talking about the same things again. And that needs to be, but that purpose needs to be there up front as well, doesn't it, for things like group chats? So here's a question for you about onto the writing of the book, really, and the researching of the book. Did the book change much from your original concept of what you wanted it to be? As you researched it, did it throw up things that were unexpected and took it off in a different direction? Or did you kind of structure the book in advance such that it could accommodate the research as you brought it in?
I was kind of doing them side by side. So I started kind of planning it out, and then I was looking for ways to kind of bulk it out and add to it. So it did change, but it was like controlled change. It wasn't so much that I found a crazy new discovery and kind of went down that rabbit hole. I had to keep changing things because the technology changes. I had to keep changing things in the end. Like, I think just as I was submitting it to the publisher, I realized I'd mentioned Twitter. Twitter was Twitter then, and I had to put in I had to add something in to say now it's X, just so that anyone reading it in future. I mean, I think we still know what Twitter is, but things like that.
Some of us still call it Twitter, refuse to go X.
And then I'd read about WhatsApp has made some change, and then I'd have to revisit and be like, oh, now it allows 1,000 people instead of this many people to do this thing. So I was actually having to keep up with the technology myself while I was writing it.
Right.
And also put sort of almost a disclaimer at the end saying there are these new technologies coming, and what is it, metaverse and fourth dimension and all this extra stuff.
Well, I noticed WhatsApp have introduced the concept of communities, haven't they, recently?
That's quite new,
which is groups of groups under a community. So I mean that's going the way of corporatisation as well, isn't it? If you had a work community, then that naturally lends itself to having the development team, the research team, the operations team.
And it's worse.
Separate groups.
I think it's worse because what you get is the messages from every single that community showing up. So
well, I think the idea of that is that they separated into different groups, so you don't see.
No, once you're in the community, you see all the groups. We've got them for yoga, so there's general community messages and there's yoga messages, and I think there's a walking group or something, which I'm not in.
Do they not have the opportunity?
I'll show you on my phone. I'll show you on my phone.
I'd be interested in that because I was thinking that might work for us.
You're thinking it would work a bit better, but actually.
Yeah, interesting. So, has writing the book changed the way that you use instant messages? In what way?
It's made me bolder to come out with group chats. I've come out with a lot of them. So, if anyone was in a group chat with me, it's not personal at all. I still want to communicate with you. I still want to see you, go for coffee. I just felt that certain chats were not serving a purpose anymore. So I've come out of a lot of them, and I've also actively I've actually been leaving my phone in a different room, which was hard at first. And sometimes the phone just appeared next to me. Like I like on autopilot, I must have picked it up because I work in one room and then my bedroom. I put the phone in my bedroom where I'm not in all day. And sometimes I think it was in my bedroom and then it's in my pocket and I don't remember putting it in my pocket. And sometimes it would start in my bedroom and maybe I'd go for a snack or the toilet or something, come back, and then I'd sit down and there's my phone right there. It's like, no, you were in my bedroom. What are you doing here? Like, haven't put it back. So that was a bit of a work in progress, but I'm quite good with it now, so I can not look at my phone for a good few hours and actually focus on what I'm supposed to be doing.
It tells you about the power of habit, doesn't it?
Yeah, and seriously, some of it was literally autopilot. Like I wasn't even conscious that I picked it up. At all.
I can relate to that. I quit drinking alcohol 10 years ago. And about 3 or 4 months, thank you very much, 3 or 4 months into that, one evening I was sitting watching television and the football was on and the ball went out for a throw-in and I noticed that my hand had moved to a glass that wasn't there. That was how sort of trained into drinking I had been before I quit. That there was always a glass there and I'd always reach for it when the ball went out of play.
They say a similar thing. They say there've been experiments done on people snacking during films with things like popcorn. And they say if you use your less dominant hand, you snack less. But if you use the hand you're used to usually dipping in the popcorn, you actually eat a lot more.
So I always put it on the non-dominant
side. So they say you should try, but then maybe you're non-dominant then. But then maybe you're non-dominant then becomes your dominant.
Yeah. Well, the problem, that's almost the definition of habit forming, isn't it? It's how you train yourself. So it would work initially, but you'd start to train yourself into it. So I'm sure we'll get, when we move on to questions from the people here and hopefully on YouTube as well, they'll have some more questions for you about the content. But we are a writers group and many of us have aspirations to be published ourselves. So I thought I'd also ask you some questions about your path to publication.
Okay.
So how you got the book out into the world. So what was your approach to getting published? At what stage of what stage of the writing of the book did you start thinking about how I'm going to get this published?
Well, I obviously we had some talks from some publishers and editors and authors, so I started learning and sort of thinking about it. And then when it was actually done, I always knew that was the point that I wanted to get published, because I didn't know that a lot of non-fiction authors might be halfway through and then look for a publisher to get money to actually pay for them to write the rest and do some research. I didn't know that. And so at the end, it was quite simple. I went to Reading Library, got the Writers and Artists yearbook, because I tried Googling online, but there's so much junk out there. There's so many people who say, give me £10,000 and I'll publish your book and all this kind of rubbish. I wanted authorities. I wanted people who were genuine. So I spent quite a few evenings after work because you can't take the books out of the library. So making notes, going through the whole book, first starting with agents, because they say that if you go straight to publishers and you get rejected and then you get an agent after, your agent then has fewer avenues to go down. But if you start with agents, at least they've got everything open to them, and agents also they're worth trying because they can get to the big publishers. Like a lot of big publishers only accept agented manuscripts, not your own. So I tried like about 50 odd agents, and this was in the space of a summer, so like 3 months, and then I got a publisher, so I accepted.
Yeah. And so you're, I think the point you raise is one worth repeating of that with non-fiction is a different process, usually, often to fiction getting published.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I don't know if it would have changed much.
Yeah, but with fiction, it's way more common to require that you are required as an author to have a completed manuscript ready to go if you're pitching and proposing to a publisher or an agent. Whereas with non-fiction, it's very much more usually the case that really you only need sort of the first 2 or 3 chapters and a synopsis and a plan for what the book is going to be, and you'll get picked up that way, as you say, because they'll then often be financing the research, I guess, is the historical reason for that. But you started down the route of mainstream traditional publishers and then a representation.
Not even mainstream. Any that were in the book that would take my kind of work. So it was a whole mixture. It was big, small, sub publishers, independent publishers, but just any, because in the writers and artists yearbook they tell you what that publisher is looking for, because publishers are all looking for different things. Some have specialisms, some will take anything, some just want poetry, some just want children's books. They're all different. So you can cross out, for me, I could cross out the ones that want children's books or want poetry, because I'm not doing poetry this time. And then when you get the list, you have to cross-check with their website, make sure that they're actually open with applications, and check what the process is. Check that they've got, because some is just like one person, and some are like 10 people, and maybe 3 of those 10 people are interested in what you're doing, and they may or may not be open for application. So you have to go through a whole process of like checking and making sure that they still, because sometimes the information can be a bit out of date, print can get out of date, so maybe they used to take fantasy but now they don't take fantasy anymore, so you have to check all that as well.
And it's like, although the sort of the format of a book proposal is largely the same, each publisher or agent might have certain slight differences in the way they want the information to be presented to them in your proposal. So I suppose it's their way of filtering out people that aren't paying attention as much as anything. They must get a lot of submissions. So if they say, okay, you need to submit in this format, we need this, we need that, we need the other. If you don't fulfill that, they can just ignore it without even reading it.
Yeah, definitely. And then because I was doing so many applications in such a short time, there were a couple that I messed up as well. Like it might have gone out copy and paste job with the wrong name. So two or 3 might have been messed up, but.
So would you have, I mean, in the end you found a publisher, and we talk about the Book Guild of Publishing, straight down very much the self-publishing route. If it came to that as well,
I would have. I was always, it was going to be publishers, it was going to be agents first. Then if no agents, publishers, then if no publishers, I would have done it self-published, because I was determined that it would be published.
And the Book Guild falls somewhere between traditional mainstream publishing and self-publishing. They're kind of classed as hybrid publishing. Is that correct? Is that how...
They have different kinds of contracts. So they're a publisher. They do give some people full, because of things like Amazon, Amazon Kindle. Everyone can publish a book. So the tradition used to be that a publisher would give you money, take on your book, sort everything for you, put it straight into bookshops. But now Amazon makes up its own genres, and books are flying off the shelves left, right, and center in all different means. It's kind of, and also Amazon's obviously hoovering up all the sales as well. So that means that for smaller bookshops, they have to be more selective about what they take in. So it's not as straightforward as it used to be, and that's where hybrid publishing comes in. So if your book is good, but it's not like a big mainstream hit that the publisher thinks will just fly off the shelves, you'll be offered a contract that you'll also contribute something to. And I believe that's become more common, and some of the other authors that have talked to us as well have also. I think some of Kate Paul's might have had a hybrid deal, was it? A couple of authors we've had had.
I know that Kate
kind of deal.
was exhausted in her search for an agent. Famously so. She pitched 19 different books before she got them, not just an agent. But and so I mean, I suppose it's fair to say that the hybrid model is perhaps a better fit for authors that are writing in something that's very niche.
It could be, unless you also find niche publishers who only publish books about, I don't know, rivers in England or something like that. So you do get very niche publishers. So it's really a jungle out there, to be honest.
Just trying to sort through that to sort of find the best fit for you, isn't it?
Yeah, and also best fit. Like if one comes along and says, "Here's a contract," there's no guarantee that in 6 months or less another one will come along.
Yeah.
So it depends how long you want to wait, how long you want to hold out.
Sure. So the book itself is published next week, 28th of June, end of next week.
Oh yeah, it is next week.
Yeah, it is. You're that close.
Wow.
So knowing what you know now, you're this close to actually having the book out in the world.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would do differently, either in the writing or in the sort of path of publication of getting published?
Yeah.
How would you approach things differently if you could?
The marketing. I would have laid the groundwork for my marketing earlier. I would have got my website earlier, because I kind of thought, I'll have it when I get my book. But it takes, and I should know this as a marketer, it takes so much time to actually build up a web presence. So you really want to start getting your social media followers as early as possible. Think about blogging, even if you want to get published, even if your blog isn't imminent. Sorry, your book isn't imminent. Find something related, or even just about your own experiences as a poor lonely writer or something to blog about, just so you're getting your name out there. Start a writers group, that's a good one.
Join the writers group.
Join the writers group, that's been really helpful. But just think of ways that you can get your presence so you become somebody, because the publishers they love the celebrities, they love the people with I think they want a minimum usually of like 10,000 Instagram or TikTok followers or something. So get yourself known for something as early as you can, and get people interested in you, so that when the book comes, it's easier to actually throw it out into those networks and get noticed. And I would have worked harder at that earlier.
And I guess bringing it full circle, that brings us right the way back to that original question of who are you to write this book?
Yeah.
If you can demonstrate that through that type of work being done up front, that helps answer that question as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Excellent. Is it so? Your book's coming out next week. Is it too early to ask you what's next? Are you still too focused on this to even think about what you might be doing?
It's going to be this until at least the end of the summer, I think. Yeah. Might work on some. I've got a backlog of poetry that I might work on after this. That's a bit lighter, a bit easier to put together.
I was going to say, but do you think after this that you'll go back to poetry and short stories and fiction, or keep with non-fiction, or try and juggle both?
I think poetry for a bit, and then I'll get that novel and dust it off and see where I go from there with that. Because I'm sure
I do remember liking the concept when you first talked about it, when you joined the group of your novel of like a phone box or a phone that contacts the dead. You said, sounds smart, doesn't it? Good one. So that's pretty much the end of the questions that I have, Louisa. So let's fire it open to the group and to people online. Oh, look, we're in sunlight. I hope we can still be seen okay.
Is there anyone online?
Have we got any questions from online? We've got Maria in the group.
I can't see any comment section. Okay. Enabled under customization. I googled, if you go into customization, it says enable comments.
Oh, I don't know.
We should have thought of that in advance. Well, there's a lesson learned. So if that needs turning on, we can.
There is a chat here. So and Nicholas managed to.
I can't see.
Okay. Well, there is a chat, and I can't see any questions.
Okay.
So
all right. Anyway, that's by the by. We've got people in the room. Does anybody in the room have a question for Louisa about? Yes. Go on then, Maria.
Are you thinking of doing an Audible version? I don't know if that's in the cards. Have I asked you that before?
I am.
So are you doing an Audible version, an audio book?
I wasn't thinking of doing that, but I read a really compelling argument to do that. because apparently audiobooks sell really well. And if you can put an audiobook alongside like your ebook and your regular book, apparently it can really help boost sales. It would be really hard to do. I'd probably have to lock myself away for a weekend, and you have to go back, you have to re-record. But so I wasn't considering it, so I thought it'd be too much work, but actually it might be worth it. So I am considering doing that. Yeah.
And presumably that would, at the moment, that would fall outside of your contract with Book Guild, would it not? So because
that would be mine entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think if depending on how it works with your publisher, the publisher had the rights, or if you contracted with them to produce an audio book as well, then they would be of help, I suppose, in setting up a studio for you to do the recording. Whereas if it's down to you, you've got to sit yourself in a room somewhere and
I would
get
have
the
thought
software
if they
yourself.
had the means to do that, then it probably would have been added to the contract. I haven't asked, but I would have thought if that was something they could provide, they would have thought of that and added that to the contract already. Because that hasn't been added to, and that's something I could do. I mean, you can use AI voices as well now. That's probably an option.
And there are plenty of voice artists that
and there's voice artists. Then you start getting into extra costs, etc.
Yeah.
But I know how hard it is to record because I've done voice overs for things in work, and much fewer words than are in this book. But even then, it took ages because of re-recording. I said it wrong, stumbling over yourself, and things like that.
Your voice will be gone by the end of 3 days.
Oh my god, yeah. But it is now I've read that it really is beneficial for sales. I'm actually considering and thinking about how to do it.
I love Audible books, and I very rarely have time. I find to read an actual book, but I listen to Audible books, podcasts all the time. I can do it while multitasking, while I do something else. I actually really like listening to the author in my ear. And one I've listened to recently, he's like sort of coming out of the book and telling you things or extras, like what you said, the extra. So he says, okay, and just on top of this has just come out with an idea, and then he's like done extra bits on top. So it's actually ended up being longer, but it's more personal, and I love I've got both, but I love just listening.
You're actually not the first person that's asked me about audiobooks as well. So
no, it sounds. See, there was an event here last night in Fourbears Books with an author called Laura Coffey, whose book is a travel memoir, and she has an Audible version, an audio book out of that. She said it was quite interesting because she didn't realise that there would be she didn't realise there would be an audio book that she would end up reading and narrating herself. And she says if she had known that while she was writing the book, she might have given herself pause in terms of the content she put into the book, knowing she would have to. There was some sexy scenes, and there was some a lot of Greek mythology in there. So pronouncing the names and things like that became an issue as well. So it's something to think about if you think you're going to end up narrating your own book.
Yeah.
What you are comfortable reading.
Yeah.
But that won't apply to this.
No.
Nicholas, you have a question.
This is your very first one written that you publicised.
Yes, it is. It's my first published book. I've had some poetry published, but not a whole book, just like the odd poem in an anthology. So this is the first book.
Nicolette, we've got more questions. Let's go. We go Nicolette, and then we'll go to Ashwin, and then we'll go to.
I'm just wondering how supportive you found the Book Guild in terms of proofreading, editorial advice, layout, how much actual advice they gave you, or did you literally just present them with it and they published it as was?
Oh no, there was there was typesetting.
Yes. Okay.
There was first initial editing, typesetting, proofreading.
Yeah.
And every time I found mistakes, it would sort of come back to me up until the point of publication.
How long did that take, that whole process, do you think?
Well, I've been doing it since signing the contract, really. I'd have to, I don't know if I can put a number on it, but each time I did it, it would take me about 4 hours to read through it. And then for a few mistakes, you'd hand it back and then get it back again, and then it'd take another about 4 hours to go through it. So it was it was a tough process.
Yes.
And you have a question as well.
I mean, it's going to be like a very subjective question to be fair. Like you said that you were writing something else before this.
Yeah.
Before writing this. So what was something different that like you to publish this book and like not finish. I mean, that was like that's one of your drafts, and there may be many drafts. But what led you to actually publish this book?
Well, I changed to this one because I'm currently an internal communications manager. My whole kind of history of working has been like copywriting, involving social media, involving more of communications. So I thought this would be quicker because novels can take years and years and years. Yeah. So I thought this would be quicker, and it's in line with what I do. And yeah, and it hopefully looks good on my CV as well. Okay. So it's sort of this, whereas another novel would take longer to get it over the line, longer to work on it, and it would be longer before I could benefit from it. Whereas this has, for me, I saw more short-term benefits. So that's why, really.
Well, it's not something that should be disregarded, really, and considered that, yeah, with a non-fiction book in this type of subject, that adding credibility to your career is not a bad thing. It's not a bad reason to have a book out there. Not a bad reason to look to get a book published. I mean, there are lots of reasons why authors would want to get published. Yeah. Ranging from sort of just purely for the thrill of it, or whatever. But career reasons and credibility in that. Perfectly good reason. Actually.
Yeah.
You had a question, sir?
Yeah, just wanted to ask, what do you think the book, you chose the format of a book instead of, I don't know, you're already blogging and talking blogs, and there are so many other ways in which you can put up the site and your information, like for example, podcasts. Why a book?
I've always wanted to write a book since I was since I had conscience, basically. I've wanted to write a book. Yeah. That's always been my goal, whereas podcasts are more modern. I don't really want to sit talking for hours. That's not really my style. I've always had a dream I can't even remember when it started that I wanted to write. It's always been there. Like, I was just always captivated by stories, by books. I dedicate it to my nana, who used to just bring me bags and bags of books from charity shops. I'm surprised Cardiff's charity shops had any books left for kids, because she was just taking them all and bringing them to me and my sister, and she would bring them and I would read them. So always, that's the answer, really. Like, there was no question.
I think that it's still the previous answer sort of feeds into that a little bit as well, doesn't it? The credibility factor. Books are authoritative in a way that other media may approach, but maybe don't yet. I mean, maybe that's the beauty of, in your categorization, the second dimension. Books sit in the second dimension of human communication, and they're a recorded media. Yeah. That is recorded for posterity with a degree of authority. A book, if it gets an ISBN number, it ends up in the British Library. It's a reference material. Podcasts might get there. Other forms of communication and recorded media might get there to that same level, but they're not maybe there yet. And so the idea of having it in print for that reason is still an attractive one, isn't it?
Yeah,
would be for me at least.
It's always what I wanted. Yeah. Always, like, maybe there's some kids these days that are like, oh, when I grow up, I really want to have a podcast or something.
Well, none of the kids that come to Fourbears, I think. Let's hope not. I think we've pretty much got towards the end of it. Have we got any more questions from the room? In which case, you've got one more. Come on, then, Maria.
Obviously, we said about the support. You mentioned Caversham Writers. I know you're a member of, is it the Authors Guild?
The Society of Authors.
Society of Authors. Did they give you any help, or were there any of the groups or institutions that you remember of that gave you any help, or that you found really useful to get advice from?
Society of Authors definitely sign up. If you can sign up just after you sign the contract, or if you're about to, because one of the big things they do is they look at the contract. Like, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know what's it called, intellectual property law or law around literature or publishing, and they're not lawyers either, but they have experts, so they can look over your contract. They can help you make suggestions for any questions you might ask, or if something doesn't look right, or if they think a publisher's overlooked something. So I would say absolutely. And then there's loads of information. They're actually a union, so I'm still kind of discovering what they do, but I have found them really helpful, especially because because looking at the contract, I'm like, well, seems all right, but I have no clue if that's so throwing it to them and getting them to check it over and help me raise some questions.
That sounds like a very sage advice, is to get professional representation in whichever form you can. So I mean, if you were agented, they would go a long way towards providing that type of support.
Yeah, they probably would
as well. But in the absence of that, then absolutely some kind of union like that.
Yeah,
they're going to do that for them.
And you can ask them any questions at any time when you're a member. You can reach out to them for anything. Say, is this normal? Should it be like this? If you had an idea about something and maybe your publisher hasn't met your idea, rightly or wrongly, like you can ask them and be like, what would be normal? What do they typically do? And you can also use there's loads of resources like on the website. So I'd say definitely.
Okay, so you think Society of Authors, Caversham Writers, obviously, publishers, those have been your three big sources of.
Excellent. Well, I think all that remains is to tell everybody how they can get your book. It's out next week. It's up there. It's available for pre-order. You can get it on all of the websites.
Especially Fourbears.
And I was going to say, Fourbears books, you can pre-order if you're in the UK. In fact, it probably dispatches overseas. There we go. Even if you're overseas, Fourbears books, we'll put the link. If the link isn't ready in the chat for YouTube, we'll put it there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Should be. Link should be there. But yeah, I'll tell people. Some people have asked me about overseas. Do you ship to America as well?
We can.
There we go.
Ship it, quite a big shipping charge, but.
Okay.
Okay. Fourbears books will ship to the UK and overseas.
Excellent.
Postage and packing extra.
Excellent.
So I think all that remains is to thank you for coming and talking to us. And as is traditional, is we give the author a box of biscuits. So thank you, Louisa. Thank you very much. And we should stop the live stream now because we're saying goodbye, everyone. I'm going to do that wavy thing that we're told we shouldn't do.
Bigger end stream.